morning. If everyone would please have their seats. I am Mike McGee, Chairman of the Lakeland Area Chamber of Commerce. And on behalf of the Chamber, I'd like to welcome you to the 29th Annual Economic Forecast Breakfast. I am very honored to recognize our longstanding partner for this popular event, Allen & Company of Florida. Without their tremendous leadership and support of Ralph Allen, Keith Albritton, and their fantastic team, this event would not be possible. At this time, I would like to invite Kevin Drake, publisher of the Ledger Media Group, to offer the invocation.
Let's pray. Father, we pause for a moment to give thanks to you. Thank you for the privilege to live in a beautiful place like Lakeland, Florida. I pray a special blessing this morning on every person and every business that's represented here. God, I pray that 2016 would just be a fantastic year for every single one of the businesses here. And we thank you for the food that you've given to us. Thank you for the privilege to be here today. I pray for our speaker. Thank you for allowing him to be here. And God, we just want to acknowledge you in every way. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Kevin, thank you very much. Allen & Company of Florida, Florida's oldest investment firm, was founded by J. Everett Allen in 1932. The company has been a strong corporate leader in our community for more than 83 years. Keith Albritton, President and CEO of Allen & Company, joined the firm in 1996 and earned his CFP certification in 2001. In 2007, Keith accepted the position of President for Allen & Company, and 2 years later was named their CEO. Keith lends his talents to numerous organizations within the community through current and previous board positions. Under his leadership, Allen & Company continues to strive for excellence within the wealth management industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Keith Albritton to the podium to begin our program.
Thank you, and once again, welcome, Mike. Congratulations on your role this year as chairman of the board of the Chamber. We're counting on you to do great things, and it's been great to be a great friend over the years, and we wish you the best of luck. Call us if we can help. I also want to thank Corey Skates and his team. Corey's the president of the Chamber, and many folks that went into making this morning possible. We thank you as well. I'd also give thanks to Robert Meir and Chris Johnson and Robin Chaddock from Allen & Company. They run our IT and our marketing. We're thankful they've been here early and getting all the IT set up, and so what we experienced today, we're thankful and appreciate your hard work. So a round of applause for all the work that's been done. Well, there's not much going on this year. I don't know if you've noticed. It's just been a nice, calm start to the new year, so the timing is excellent on today's program as we try to sort through what this economy is doing and how it might impact us as business leaders. Let me first, before I kind of introduce our program, I did want to take a second and applaud all of our associates that are here. I'm guessing we have at least half of our firm here today, so if you're with our firm, Allen & Company, please stand up for a second and let us recognize you. It is a challenging job that we have. I admire each of you for what you do for your clients as we live out our mission at Allen & Company, which is to help our clients grow, protect, and plan for their prudent wealth transfer. And so we thank you for the hard work you're doing, especially in challenging markets. But that is our mission, and we do that under under the auspices of a number of core values, one of which is always place our clients' interests first. That's the key that has kept us in business for 83 years, and we try to do that under the same goal of making this place a little bit better than we found it, a profound and positive difference. So we appreciate all the work that many of you do in the community as well, and it's our proud partnership with the Chamber for 29 years in running that we are able to sponsor this, and it is our aim every year to bring to you speakers that can help you with your organizations, whether you be a nonprofit, a corporate entity in the government, whatever your organizations might be. Our goal is that you would have better information this year with which to make decisions for your business and your organization. And so the quality of our speakers is the utmost of our concern. And this year, both Brian Westbury and Tony Villamil join us again. And last year they did an excellent job. And as you know, I always like to go back and take a look, right? How are you doing? How are our predictions? Nobody can get them perfect every year. It's not possible. But in the field of economics, what we're looking for is somebody that can help us be directionally right, just not absolutely wrong. That's what we're looking for. And so how did we do? So just briefly, as I look back last year and studied where we guided you, Tony spoke of a few items that really all came true. He predicted that Florida would be the fastest growing state of the Big Four, that Governor Scott would win his bet with Governor of Texas, and we would beat Texas for GDP growth. It appears as that has happened, and that the state of Florida would grow faster than the nation, all of which occurred. We're lucky to be in the state. We're lucky to be in the area that we're in. Even a report this week spoke of the job growth in Lakeland, Winter Haven as the fastest growing in our state. And so we are fortunate to be in our geographic location for sure. Brian spoke of this economy that he calls a plow horse economy. At the front end is the racehorse, at the back end is the dead horse. And so what you get is a plow horse as the racehorse of the economic, entrepreneurial, technological boom that has been going on for really decades, continues to drag along the rest of the economy, and yet we move forward. So that could not be any more true, and so I would say again this year that they gave us great advice and feedback last year, and we welcome you back this year, and a hearty Lakeland welcome to you both. And now let me get started with Tony. Dr. Tony Villamil is a nationally recognized business economist with over 35 years of successful career as a senior economist, university dean, high-level policymaker for both federal and state governments. He has served as the U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce, a policymaker. He did that under the first George H.W. Bush. He is the founder of a successful economic consulting practice, the Washington Economics Group, where today he runs that organization. He is a recent member of the President's Advisory Committee on Trade Policy and Negotiations in Washington, D.C. He is the immediate past chairman of the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors of Florida during 1999-2000. He directed tourism, international trade, and economic development for the Department of State of Florida in the office of Governor Jeb Bush. He's presently on the board of directors of the Spanish Broadcasting System, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Pan American Life Insurance Group. He was most recently appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce to serve in the Florida District Export Council. That's about half of his bio, and it goes on and on. He has a master's degree from LSU, an honorary doctorate degree from FIU, where he earned the distinction of being nationally recognized and making a great impact on the nation's economy. And so without further ado, I welcome Dr. Tony Villamil.
Thank you, Keith. What a great pleasure to be with my Lakeland colleagues and the Chamber and Lakeland Chamber and the great job that we do here in our community relative to the civic engagement and business engagement. You can see this. This is a record number of business executives and civic executives that are here today. So my job is easy. You know, I'm a practitioner like Brian of the dismal science of economics. And the problem is there's not a lot of dismal things going on in Florida. So I'm going to be concentrating primarily on the Florida economy and the external economic environment impacting our state. And then Brian will go in deeper in terms of the U.S. economy, the fundamentals, and other areas that he's so much of an expert on. And we have become, Brian and I, is a Brian Tony show. You know, we become one speaker in many ways. So it's a great pleasure again to be here. I gave you the headlines here. Then I can sit down. But I'll go over some of the numbers and some of the headwinds that are taking place in the global economy. So this time around, I'm going to emphasize a little more the global economy and how could that impact us here in terms of growth. But what we see for 2016, bottom line is very strong growth in Florida, again, outpacing the nation. Perhaps at a slower rate of growth that we saw in 2015 for a number of factors that I'll talk about. And Keith mentioned, obviously, Lakeland, the Lakeland area, the MSA, or Polk County, or Lakeland Winter Haven, started the year with very strong momentum, leading the nation, and the state is leading the nation, and the Lakeland area is leading the state in employment growth. So Florida entered 26 with this very strong momentum, and then we have some headwinds that I'd like to talk about here. I always drop things, you know, I'm an economist, so please bear with me. First thing we want to talk about is again, give you a sense of where we are. Obviously, that map is not drawn correctly geography-wise, but I'm an economist, not a geographer. But anyway, here's the Florida economy and some of the impulses relative to the business outlook. More and more, I find that Florida really is the business climate continues to be the major driver of our economy. It's almost like taking a flu shot before the season, and you know we're immunized against some of the ill winds that are coming out of Washington and some of the ill winds that are coming out of the global economy this year. That doesn't mean we're immune totally to it, but certainly the business climate, the way that our tax policy and so forth that I'll discuss in a few minutes, as well as the human resources and the business pro-growth business community that we have. The other major driver, of course, is the U.S. economy, and Brian assures me that we will continue growing this year, and that, to me, is another major factor in driving population growth in our state and creating the ability to sell goods and services to the rest of the U.S. And the third one that is the global economy, and that's where I see some of the major headwinds taking place this year in terms of international trade and also the impact that the global economy has on the equity markets in the U.S., which of course impacts household net worth and therefore spending in the economy. So those are your major drivers. And then when you see I have arrows here to point to the different directions. Florida Lakeland business climate is top in the nation, one of the top in the nation in terms of the fact that we have the best tax climate among the top states in the union. We have pro-growth, a pro-growth legislature. We have a pro-growth business community. We have here in Lakeland a significant base in healthcare. For example, Lakeland Regional expanding with its complex areas, you know, cutting-edge healthcare. We have also Florida Southern with one of the best colleges in the nation, private colleges in the nation, with all kinds of different programs, including free enterprise program, which is very much needed in the U.S. So we got the human resources are here on the state colleges, and we also have the Polytechnic with STEM now becoming a reality, science, technology, engineering, and math. All these things are critical to the growth of Lakeland from a business climate point of view and the very involved community that we have here in the region. U.S. economic activity, I have one arrow up, meaning kind of nothing to write home about, kind of plain vanilla, maybe 2.5% growth in the U.S. economy this year. And of course, it's an election year, so that's something I will watch very carefully because elections tend to create a certain degree of uncertainty in all of us. Every 4 years, we go through that cycle that, you know, we are So what I always tell the business community is to wear earplugs and tune out the political noise and just concentrate on the fundamentals of your business. But the U.S. economy is growing at a moderate rate with relatively low interest rates. That's very positive for Florida. I mean, and then you add to that low energy prices, that's even more positive because we're an energy importing state. So all of this is critical to us as we go forward in our state leading the nation. And then the global economic activity, I do have a couple of arrows down, and we have sluggish global economic growth, and we have some of the uncertainties regarding some of the countries. This is when we talk about doing a little more emphasis on the global economy, we talk about China, which is a wild card. Certainly the economy in China is going through a transition, and we see that happening now. We have also the fact that many U.S. companies, of course, are fully integrated with China relative to production, so that filters into the U.S., second largest economy in the world, major importer of commodities around the world, and that's impacting the business climate globally. Brazil is Florida's major trade partner, and Brazil is in deep recession, and it has been in recession the last couple of years. A lot of it is their own making relative to a political mess they have in Brazil concerning the Workers' Party and allegations of corruption. So, but out of that, what we see in Brazil, which is among the top 10 economies in the world, a changing that is taking place. The middle class is demanding reforms, and there is a growing middle class in Brazil. It's a democratic system, and I think out of that will come a better functioning government. But this year, next year, could be a little difficult for them. Then we have energy and commodity prices, excuse me, like we talked about, and the geopolitical issues that we're facing. In terms of the global economy, I don't need to tell you about the Middle East and some of these issues. Excuse me. In terms of GDP growth for Florida, we see the continuation of last year. Strong growth in GDP. Services will continue to lead the growth rate of the state. Professional and business services, education, healthcare services, leisure and hospitality. And one key measure of spending is total taxable sales, which are growing at a strong rate, and we don't see some major changes there this year. Now, a positive business environment for Lakeland, therefore, for 2016, but monitor foreign markets and geopolitical issues. And in Lakeland, we see the same thing. You led the state in payroll employment in November. Look at the growth of the private sector employment and the various industries, trade and transportation, education, healthcare services, professional and business services, leisure and hospitality, and construction related. So employment growth led the state late in 2015, so we have entered 2016 with significant momentum. Taxable sales are expanding at a very strong rate. That's the linear trend. That's a major determinant of spending and overall activity in the economy. You can see also retail activity with population growth. Also, the Lakeland area, very strong growth in both taxable sales and in retail activity. So the bottom line, really for 2016, and I'll close with that, is that Florida expanding again above national average again this year, with Lakeland in the lead. And the top business climate is the key factor there. But we also have low energy prices, which is positive for the state. We have financial liquidity still ample in the U.S., so that even though the Fed has raised interest rates at 25 basis points, or the range on rates is now a little higher, we don't see the Fed really becoming too aggressive this year, given the changes that are taking place in the global economy. And then modest increase in interest rates. We saw 25 basis points, and again, moving the range up. I don't know if the Fed is going to act again. Janet Yellen's Federal Reserve is what I call paralysis by analysis. You know, they take their time, and if they look at the global economy now as they're more looking at it, I don't see any other rate increases. At least that's my perspective. If they do raise rates again, maybe it'll be one or two times, but not any more than that. And that's positive for Florida. So Florida's environment then You got, in Lakeland, you have low energy prices, you got relatively low interest rates, ample liquidity, and a top business climate. So that to me means the following. Happy but selective business hunting, Polk County. So you can see the changes that are taking place. This year will be as good as in 2015, again, with a wary eye on global economic events that are taking place. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Laura Hawley, Senior Vice President with Allen & Company, and just want to welcome you again to the 29th Annual Economic Forecast Breakfast. And Dr. Tony, thank you for, again, giving us some encouraging words and knowing that the growth of our state will continue, especially given all of the high-profile issues that we've been hearing about globally and nationally. Certainly the media has latched onto those with a vengeance, and these are really very complex, very vexing situations that can't be solved by just, sound bites. So with us today, back once again, is Brian Wesbury, Chief Economist at First Advisors Trust, and he's going to give us his economic views and also, as he says, to be the antidote to conventional wisdom. So just a little bit about Brian. Brian served as chief economist for the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Congress. In 2001, he was named by Wall Street Journal as the nation's #1 economic forecaster, as well as USA Today ranking him as one of the nation's top 10 forecasters. Brian was a member of the Economic Advisory Council of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, and he's a regular attendee of the Economist Roundtable at the Chicago Fed. He is a graduate of Northwestern's Kellogg School of Business. He has also been named as a fellow of the George W. Bush Presidential Center in Dallas, Texas, where he worked very closely with its 4% growth projects. His writings appear in various magazines and newspapers, and is a regular on Fox, Bloomberg, CNBC, as well as several other news channels. His first published book, The New Era of Wealth, in 1999, and his latest was It's Not as Bad as You Think. Brian received recently from the University of Montana its Distinguished Alumni Award, and that award honors those that have given outstanding or are seen to be outstanding as an alumni and who have brought honor to the university, the state, or the nation. That's a big deal when you consider that there are over 91,000 graduates, and there's only been about 260 of those recipients, so congratulations for that. And again, it is our pleasure to welcome back our dear friend, Brian Wesbury.
That's better odds than the Powerball. That's my advice. Go play. No, I'm kidding. Well, good morning, everybody. This is always, literally one of my favorite events of the year. Laura, thank you so much. It's always great to be with Tony. We're like joined at the hip these days. It's great to spend time with Tony and Keith. And your wife Peyton is here, I know that, and Ralph and Joanne, and it's like old home week. I've joked about it before. I started with hair, and now I don't have any. So anyway, I'm going to tell you a story. This year I got a really lucky chance to do a bucket trip. Actually, my bucket trip changed a little bit because I went to the University of Montana. I was a rock climber. That's why I went there, believe it or not. I finally became sane and quit, but I've now turned into, I like to hunt a little bit, but I really like to fly fish. And so I always wanted to go to Patagonia to climb. That was long, long ago. But Patagonia is also home to some awesome trout fishing. And I did my bucket trip to to Patagonia in December of last year, which is really their spring. And the way all this works down there is there's nobody there, so you can't ferry a car. So everything has to be done with these little jet boats. And we went up a river, across a lake, up a river, across a bigger lake, up a river to a lake, and started fishing and fished in the lake, fished down the river. And we got to the middle lake, and the winds, I mean, this is in the middle of the Patagonia Mountains, were like 45 miles an hour right on our nose. And we're in this little, it's a float boat. If you've ever fished a river, it's, got bars where you lean up against and cast, and put two guys in the back so that the engine would stay in the water because it kept coming out. Kept me up front to try and keep the boat from blowing over, and all the water's like 39 degrees. And I'm terrified. And we are a mile from each shore, and actually one shore is a sheer cliff. The other shore, there's no way I'm going to swim on a mile in 39-degree water. And I'm like, this is it. And the guide in the back of the boat looks up at me and he says, what's the difference between an adventure and an ordeal? And the answer is attitude. And he's right. And that's actually a good, it's a good life lesson, and it's a good investing lesson too. And I actually wanted to sort of think about that because the first time I came here, I think it was 23 years ago, 24 years ago, Lakeland did not look like it does now. I think I found a TGIF to eat in when I was here that night. And it is unbelievable for an outsider who comes here once a year to watch the progress that has been made. And some of you may have lived through an ordeal, and some of you may have lived through an adventure. I don't know. It's all about attitude. But the bottom line is that when we human beings are left free, or mostly free, depending on how you want to look at it, we accomplish amazing things. And this community is a perfect example of that. And it's always exciting for me to come here, and it's unreal. You should see it from up here, the crowd. And so I want to go through a couple of things today. I want to talk about where we are. Obviously, the market's had a really rough start to the year. I think the Nasdaq's down 8%. The S&P and the Dow are down 6 or 7, something like that. Yesterday was an ugly day, and people are terrified. But I will tell you, and we've talked about this before, that people have been terrified ever since 2008. I did Fox Business last year. Liz Clayman, I don't know if she's red hair. She used to be on CNBC. She's a great host, and she asked me to come on Fox Business early last year, right after I had left here. It couldn't have been more than a couple of weeks. And usually the way these things all work out is they'll tell you what they want to talk about. You send a couple sentences on each topic and 2 or 3 things, and we sort of frame out our conversations. Not scripted, but I know kind of what they're going to ask, and they know kind of what I'm going to say, all right? And but every once in a while, they just go right off the page, or however you want to say that. And she did it to me this day. So Liz, you got to know Liz. She's a mother. I love Liz. She's an awesome lady. And she's like, this is Brian from First Trust. And then she just goes, Brian. The only thing worse would have been Brian Stewart. Like, it's like that mother's voice. I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm ready to climb under the table. What did I do? And she's like, Brian, what do you think about the 2 black swans that we've had this week? And I'm like, 2? Like, in a week? And I'm like, that's, what are they? I had no idea what she was talking about. And it was dropping copper prices. Like, anybody in here know that? I mean, I'm paid to know these things. I didn't know that happened, all right? And then the Swiss franc was revalued, and so I'm like, Liz, normally I answer the question. When I ask about copper, I'll talk about Chilean copper mines, all right, or whatever. But this time I just couldn't do it. I'm like, that makes 251 and 252 black swans that we've had in the last 6 years. We got flocks of black swans flying around. I'm like, Liz, and then you think I would have stopped there, but I didn't. I'm like, Liz, even by the way, even with this pullback in the market, the S&P's up about 200% from the bottom. The NASDAQ's up about 275% from the bottom. The economy has grown for 6.5 years in a row. We've created jobs for 70 months in a row. I'm like, Liz, you shouldn't be talking about black swans. You should be talking about golden geese. Now, by the way, she has not had me on since, all right? But when I look at our world over the last 6.5 years, you know what, everybody in here knows what a black swan is, right? It's all swans are white. And oh my gosh, there's a black one, it can't exist. That's what they call 2008. It was a black swan event, a perfect storm. It can't happen, all right, but it did, all right? And so I just kind of wanted to look real quickly. Here's just a partial list of black swans. You know, I mean, I've got TARP in there. I mean, I've got flash crash and Ebola, and I don't even know what else is in there. It's Meredith Whitney predicts the end of the muni bond market. I don't know if you remember that on 60 Minutes, and the world's coming to an end. But if you take all these black swans and put them up against the stock market over the last 6 years, yes, there's been some down times, but every single time we've come back. And I think we will continue to do that in the years ahead. So I want to talk about 3 things today. The first thing I want to talk about is, why is everybody so scared? And I believe, actually I'm going to talk a little bit about, and you want to add to that, part of being scared is, why are Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders doing so darn well? A socialist and I don't even know what, all right? All right. And he doesn't have a philosophy, a guy who makes deals, all right? And so why are they doing, and that's all part of the answer to that question. So what happened and why are people so scared? Number 2, why, partly of being scared is that we've been growing slowly. I mean, I get it, it's good for some and it's not great for others, but it's plow horse economy. Why is it a plow horse economy? And then the third question I want to answer is where we're going from here. So the first one is, you know, I went, finally got out from, actually I was on the road and I saw it in, where did I say, Raleigh, Durham. I saw The Big Short, all right? Anybody in here seen The Big Short, the movie? My name for it is The Big Lie. And here's the reason. And at the very beginning of this of the movie, they have a subtitle that says, "This is based on a true story." And it is, in the sense that there was this drum-playing, barefoot hedge fund manager, always had earbuds in his ear, lunatic, who made $2.9 billion. And that's a true story. He shorted the mortgage market and made $2.9 billion. Absolutely true. All right? And it's also true, by the way, that Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. But if I showed you a movie with Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address in your living room, is it a true story or not? Because yes, he gave the Gettysburg Address, and every word that he just said in the movie was perfectly from the history, and it's all historically correct. However, he never gave it in your living room. And it's true that this guy made $2.9 billion. What's untrue is that the banks caused it all. And they say it over and over and over and over and over again. Those lunatics, they use a lot of 4-letter words in this movie to describe Wall Street and evil bankers and all, you know, over and over, and they're idiots and they're frauds and they're crooks and they're all this stuff. And so I want to just share with you some data. There is a great book out, it came out last year, called Hidden in Plain Sight. If you are interested in the crisis, and I actually highly recommend this book to everyone in this room to understand what really happened. It's written by Peter Wallison. He was a former attorney at the Treasury, in Justice under Reagan, and then he moved to the White House. He was one of Reagan's top lawyers, and he now works at a think tank called AEI, and he names names and puts numbers down. We have the data today. And here's what I want to do. I want to give you a little history on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. These are two giant corporations, all right? They've been public, they've been private, they've been government-owned. Right now, they're kind of quasi-government. They're these weird entities, all right? They were started in the 1930s because in the 30s, we had a big real estate bust, and they were designed to make the mortgage market a better place. Okay, if you're a bank and you make a 30-year mortgage and you bring it in, you put it on your books, that's the end of it. You got to wait until it's paid off, and maybe you get some money back from it, and then you can make a new loan, or you have to wait for new deposits. But what Fannie and Freddie did is they said, hey, if that 30-year loan's made to somebody that's creditworthy, we'll buy it from you. And we'll buy a whole bunch of these, and then we'll package them up and kind of sell off pieces of these bonds made up of really good mortgages. And for decades and decades and decades, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had a 1% default rate, less than 1%. They only bought mortgages from people with higher than 660 credit scores, 20% down payments, no debt to equity, problems, and that's the kind of mortgages they bought, and it was a really solid investment. But in 1992, it changed because Congress and HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, started to say, Fannie and Freddie are, we back them. They get these low interest rates because we sort of back them. They ought to be doing something for us and the American people because of this. And so we think they ought to be buying mortgages made to low to moderate income people because there's just too many loans going to wealthy people and it's not democratic enough. And so what they did is they passed a rule and said 30% of every dollar Fannie and Freddie invest has to go to mortgages made to low to moderate income people. Now, at first, the credit quality of these loans wasn't so bad, all right? And banks really made an effort to move into neighborhoods and try to find people that were creditworthy in every neighborhood of America. But then HUD kept raising the ratio, 35, 40, 45, 50, and by 2006, 56% of all the loans that Fannie and Freddie bought had to be bought from low to moderate income Americans. So loans made to people. And by the way, the only way to do that was to reduce the standards for lending. They would buy loans to people with less than 660 credit scores, which, by the way, is a magic point. You make loans below 660, defaults go way up. They would also make loans to people with no down payments, or buy loans that were made to people with no down payments, and high debt to income ratios. And by 2007, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac owned 31 million subprime loans, 76% of all the subprime loans outstanding. Banks only owned 24% of subprime loans. So let me ask you, did Wall Street cause this problem, or did the government cause this problem? Because the demand for subprime loans was created by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And what happens is, once you get to that point and you've created this whole market and you've created a lot of frenzy in a market, and then Alan Greenspan lowers interest rates to 1%, everybody tries to play in the game. I mean, by the way, I know there's a street out here, like Roosevelt Road in my neighborhood, where there's a building. I know exactly, I can see it in my mind's eye. It was a mortgage broker in 04, 05, 06. Then it shut down for a while. And then in 08, 09, it opened up again, and it was a gold dealer. And then it shut down about a year and a half ago, and now it's a smokeless tobacco shop. And by the way, it's the same owners. You get what I'm saying? When you create that kind of environment where it's a frenzy, everybody gets involved. And when you start telling me, oh, no, it's the people that made the mortgages that were the evil ones, I'm going to tell you, no way. It was the government who was buying them over and over and over again. And so when we look at this story, that's what I mean about the big lie. Yes, there was a lot of bad paper out there. But no, it wasn't the banks that drove that problem. It was the government. And the government wants you to believe that the private sector caused it because they want you to believe that they saved us. And so what's fascinating about this is that there's Republicans and Democrats who believe this whole story. All right? And so I want to switch to this. I think I've shared this chart with you before. This goes back. Now, realize this has nothing to do with today, other than the sense I'm laying the historical foundation here a little bit. This is the S&P 500, the stock market, from January of 2008 all the way to June of 2009. So it's most of the crisis in stocks and then the beginning of the recovery, okay? The first 6 months of the bounce up. Now, if you can read on the bottom, kind of right in the middle of that chart, right before the market goes straight down, all right? By the way, every one of those red dots is a Federal Reserve meeting during that year. Boy, they met in a lot, and it didn't help at all, did it? But right when the market is going straight down, that's when Lehman Brothers failed, all right? That's when we started doing quantitative easing, all right? The Federal Reserve was buying billions and trillions of dollars worth of bonds, and it's also when we passed TARP. TARP was passed October 8th, 2008. Now, there's lots and lots of people that think that once we pass TARP, the crisis passed. But in reality, October 8th, 2008 is 5 months before the market bottomed. We passed TARP, we forced banks to take the money, and yet the market fell another 40% after TARP was passed. So does anybody in here want to tell me TARP saved us? Unless there's some kind of delayed reaction, which, by the way, doesn't happen. If TARP saved us, it should have saved us right away. It didn't. It never did save us. The green dot at the very bottom, and we don't have enough time to go into it, but I've talked to you about it over the years, is when we changed mark-to-market accounting. That's when the world changed. We were forcing banks to write assets down to prices that were unreal, way too low, all right, and making them take that as a capital hit. You know, if you would have had to mark your house down in 2009 or 2010 and pay off your loan, how many of you would still be in your house? All right, because what we know is the house prices went way down and now they've come back. So by holding on, you're okay. But if we forced you to take the loss right at the bottom, you would have been toast. Well, that's what we did to the banks. We forced them to take the losses right in the middle of the hurricane. All right? And by doing that, we created trillions of dollars of losses rather than just hundreds of billions. And when we changed that accounting rule, and now the banks could say, you can't force me to mark, the hurricane's going on. Wait until it's over. All right? That's when we saved the banks. That's when banks stopped going bankrupt. That's when the economy started to grow, and that's when the market turned around and came back. In other words, what I'm telling you is government didn't save us. The private sector saved us. Now, the next chart is, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I've been a money and banking professor up here many, many, many times over the years. But this is what the Fed did. They did quantitative easing. The blue line is QE. They did QE1 to QE2, QE3. You can see all three steps. They bought $3.5 trillion worth of bonds. And guess what? Banks, that's what the Federal Reserve has done this for 100 years, 100 plus years. And for 95 of those years, from 1913 till 2008, every time the Federal Reserve bought bonds from banks, the banks took the money and lent it out. But this time, if you look at that orange line, which is, by the way, it's just deposits in banks, so it's the size of the banking system, they didn't. The Fed bought tons and tons of bonds, gave banks cash, 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 and you know what the banks did? Banks said, well, we're just going to put this on the side. We're holding it as excess reserves. That's what we're going to do. It's just excess reserves. It's just sitting there. And right now, banks have $2.3 trillion of excess reserves, money that they could use to make loans, but that they aren't. All right? Now, they're making new loans. That's the orange line. It is going up, but it's not going up anywhere near what the Federal Reserve, how fast the Federal Reserve bought bonds. And the big question then becomes why? Why didn't banks use all of this? I mean, they're supposed to maximize their leverage all the time, especially if they're evil and greedy and all this stuff. You know, I mean, why didn't they? They're free money. They could just make loans like crazy, all right? Make fees, make interest pay, you know, and the Fed's giving them all this cash. So why didn't they do it? And I think one of the key reasons is that the Fed always told us that QE and TARP, all of it, was temporary. It's not going to last forever. Anybody in here have a scary, mysterious Italian uncle? You know, I mean, like, you know, Rolex watch, like leather jacket, drives a big Cadillac. If you ask him what he does, it's like import, export. And what if he shows up at your house one day and he's got a little canvas bag and he says, in this canvas bag is $100,000 in cash and I'm going to put it in your storeroom for safekeeping temporarily. You going to touch it? No way. I mean, by the way, he hasn't come back for 7 years, all right? He's probably in the trunk of somebody else's car. And you're still not going to touch it. Because you know the minute you take $500 out of that thing, he's coming back. All right? And that's what I'm telling you banks are doing. They're saying, we can't lend this money out because the Fed's going to take it away at some point. We can't make loans that we have to call, so we're just not going to use it all. And by the way, this is why we don't have hyperinflation, why gold is not trading at $5,000 an ounce, why the dollar hasn't collapsed. Remember all those scare stories? If the Fed prints all this money, we all learned this, you know, in school, and if you can find it on the internet, everywhere you look, it's like when the Fed prints this much money and buys this many bonds, we always have hyperinflation. Well, where is it? Last time I looked, gas is now less than $2 a gallon. That's not inflation, all right? Gold's not 5,000. It went from 1,800 back down to 1,100. The dollar got stronger, not weaker. So somehow you have to come to grips with that this is not all about an easy money recovery. I'm making the same point in a different way. The Fed didn't cause the recovery. Everybody wants to think that when they bought all these bonds, that's what created our growth. And that's, by the way, that's why I never worried about tapering, all right, when they end QE, because the Fed's done buying bonds. And it's also why I'm not worried about Fed rate hikes right now. There's still a long way to go before they're tight. And by the way, usually when the Federal Reserve raises rates, what they do is they take liquidity out of the banking system. And that makes money more scarce, and that's what lifts interest rates up. But now we are in a totally different world. So you know what happens now? When the Fed raises interest rates, they basically just say, we're going to pay more on our excess reserves. That's it. They didn't lower the amount of excess reserves. There's no less liquidity in the banking system. So if you worry about the Fed hiking rates, and I get it, it's a coincidence. The Fed hiked rates. They said we might have 4 more this year, and then the market went down. I think it's a coincidence. All right, it may have helped people start off on their scary stuff, but it's a coincidence. It's not because the Fed raised rates, all right? Because right now there's massive liquidity in the banking system. And I want you to look at this. Anybody worried that 2008 is coming back? You can't see all these numbers. I just want to highlight a couple of them. There's 2 columns on the right. The first one is Q4, December, or November, or however you want to think of it, 2007. Right at the peak of just before we collapsed, all right? And the banking system back then, the top line is loans to deposits. The banks were making $102 of loans for every $100 of deposits that they had. In other words, they had to borrow money to keep their loans going. They had lent more than people had given them. Today, they're making loans at 73 cents of every dollar of deposit, $73 of every $100. The banks are not using the deposits they have. In fact, they're lending out less than 3/4 of them. And their capital, which is, by the way, the 5th line down, if you can't see it, it's Tier 1 capital. It's the key ingredient of how safe banks are. It was 7.5%, which actually is pretty high already in 2007, and that's why the whole banking system didn't go down. But today it's 12.6. Banks have more capital than they've ever had. In fact, I would argue they have excess capital, too much. All right? And so we have, and in one of those lines on there, you can see it, $8.4 trillion of loans outstanding. $6.7 trillion was what it was in 2007. There's more loans. Banks are bigger. The money supply is bigger today than ever before. However, it hasn't kept up with the Fed's creation of money, and that's why there's less leverage in the system today than you have to go back to the 1970s. And that was before we had credit cards. I mean, I guess you could get a diners club if you traveled a lot or something, but your college kids weren't getting anything in the mail back in the 70s. And so the bottom line is, anybody who believes we're sitting here ready on the precipice of going back into 2008 hasn't looked at the data on the banks. There is no leverage in the banking system today, not even remotely close to what we had. All right, now I want to go on and answer the next two questions real quickly. First one is, why are we growing so slow? So I'm going to start off with this chart. I know in the back it might be a little hard to see, but you only have to see that orange line, Tennessee Yeller. All right, and if you look at that, what I did is I started in 1990, and it's government outlays, total government spending. It was about $1.2 trillion. And that orange line, I said, what if we pushed up spending each and every year by the population growth? All right, if we had 1% new population, you have to increase spending by 1% to keep up with the population. Plus, we're going to increase it by inflation. So by the end, by 2015, where that orange line is, that's how much we would have to spend to be spending the same today per person that we spent in 1990, even after inflation. All right? So that's it, right? If you were happy with the size of government in 1990, think it was too big, too small, it doesn't, anyway, that orange line keeps it the same size year after year after year after year per person. What we actually did is the blue line. That's what spending actually was. The green line is taxes. If we would have held spending down to population growth, we would have a $400 billion surplus today. But instead, we have a $450 billion deficit. And it's a spending issue. Now, some people might say, well, wait, it's because of the wars. All right, so let's take a look at defense spending. Here you go, same thing. Orange line is CPI, inflation, plus population growth on defense spending starting in 1990, all right? And then Bill Clinton kept defense spending flat. We got attacked on 9/11. George Bush pushed it up. We had 2 wars. Barack Obama came in, and we cut spending. And today we're spending less per person on defense than we would have if we would have just kept it that same orange line all along the way. In other words, it's not because of defense spending that we have deficits today. You know what it is? It's ex-defense. This is ex-defense, what I would call core government spending, Department of Education, Department of Commerce, welfare, Social Security, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid. That's what all of this is. And Bill Clinton actually didn't increase it very much the first 10 years of that chart, basically. Last 2 years of Bush, first 8 years of Clinton. George Bush and then Barack Obama kept it high. All right, now I want to go down just a little bit shorter in terms of time frame here. This goes back to 2000. You can see it's the same thing. Forget starting in 1990. Let's just do 2000. We would have a surplus today if we would have held spending down. But now I'm just going to look since 2008. This is Barack Obama. All right? Defense spending was, he ended the wars. It was still going up when he took office. It took him a little while, but he cut spending massively. So there we go. All right? We are spending way, way less, $200 billion a year less than we would if it would have continued on that path of population. And here's, I believe, the real treat. So what I did here is I took, that orange line is still spending based on population. The blue line, however, and both of these lines are without defense, without TARP. So remember, when TARP was passed, we spent, I'm just going to call it $700 billion, although it wasn't quite. And then it got paid back, right? So that would have been increases in spending and payback spending. So I took that out. Let's look, I'm talking about core government. And I also took out Fannie and Freddie Mac. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Do you know why? In the last 2 years, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have paid, or you can look at it the other way, our government has taken $100 billion of profits from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And do you know what the government calls these things? Do you think that's revenue? If they take profits from Fannie and Freddie, shouldn't it be included in tax receipts? No, they count it as negative spending. I'm not kidding you. So if the government spent 3.7, they take the 100 billion from Fannie and Freddie and they say, see, we only spent 3.6. All right? Well, so we adjusted for that too. We took it out. And I want you to look at that. Non-defense, non-TARP, non-Fannie and Freddie spending has massively increased. It's about, if you really look at it, it's about $400 billion, which is the size of our deficit, above where it would have been if we just kept it along consumer prices and population. And the problem here is that the bigger the government gets, the smaller the private sector gets. Every dime the public sector spends has to come from the private sector. Now, if the government builds a road that opens up new neighborhoods and opens up new manufacturing facilities and areas for that, and opens up new shopping, and opens up a transportation corridor to somewhere else, and they actually benefit the businesses, that's awesome public spending. I am not trying to tell you that all public spending is bad. However, when the government takes tax dollars from profitable people and profitable businesses and subsidizes windmills and solar energy, which would not exist without without subsidies, that slows down growth. And how about this? If you look at Social Security disability payments, this is not Social Security. The blue line on the top, I went back to 1967, that's the monthly payment for people on disability. It's up 1,100% since 1967. The orange line in the middle is the price of a first-class postage stamp. That's up 900% since 1967. The green line is average hourly earnings. So that green line is people that actually have jobs. They work, and don't forget that they have to pay for postage stamps and everybody that's on disability. You want to know why the middle class is suffering? You want to know why the economy is growing slow? Is because government is growing faster than the private sector and sucking the life out of it. That's why we're the plow horse economy and not a racehorse economy. Now, in the midst of all of that, there are some unbelievable things happening. How many of you own an iPhone? I think I mentioned this last year. That's 64 gigabytes of flash memory in that mid-range iPhone. You remember this. In 1991, flash memory was a brand new technology, $45,000 per gigabyte. 64, the middle range iPhone times $45,000 is $2.88 million bucks. That is a $3 million phone in your pocket. That's why they say don't bend it, all right? And what I'm saying is you're getting it for 99 bucks. So one of the things you hear all the time is the reason we're growing slow, it's not that government stuff, Westbury. It's because businesses, those evil, just profit-hungry businesses, aren't investing. But think about that. If I only have to spend 99 bucks to get $3 million worth of technology, if I only have to spend $1,000 and it takes me an hour to crack the genome, and the first time it took $1 billion to do it, it makes it look like I'm not spending, when in reality I am. The cost of drug research has plummeted. The cost of fracking a well has plummeted. The cost of delivering goods has plummeted. The cost of gasoline has plummeted. It's because of technology. And so what we do in economics is we use real. The opposite of real isn't fake, all right? Real just means inflation adjusted. All I'm doing is saying, hey, you get 64 gigabytes of flash memory today, we're going to count it as a real investment. That's what we're looking at. How much are you really getting in terms of technology? And today we have more investment than ever before. And I want you to look at this line in another way too. How many of you have taken Uber? Uber's unbelievable, right? Or Lyft, or I don't know, it doesn't matter. I was an Uber newbie a while ago. I was in Austin, Texas. Wendy took me to the airport. She drove a VW, a Rabbit, or Passat, I mean. And I'm a geeky economist, so bear with, give me forbearance. I'm like, Wendy, where'd you get this car? And she looked at me like I was a geeky economist, like, what a stupid question. At the VW dealer, you idiot. And I'm like, that's not what I meant. Did Uber buy it or did you buy it? And she's like, I bought it. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me. When Wendy went and bought this car, which she uses to run a business and drive for Uber, did it get counted, that car purchase, did it get counted as personal consumption or business investment? Personal consumption. You know what's fascinating about this? When Wendy went and bought that car, personal consumption went up, savings rates went down, and business investment didn't move. And so what people say is businesses aren't investing, when in reality what they're doing is learning how to use the balance sheets of America way more efficiently. Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, all of those allow us to use our balance sheets and leverage them for business. And business doesn't do it. Uber has a bigger market cap than all the rental car companies combined, and they don't own a car. I think it's 3 guys in a garage. Isn't that amazing? They use our balance sheets. So when you start telling me businesses aren't investing, I'm like, wait, Wendy is. The people that put their houses and their second homes up on Airbnb, they are. And so this idea that we're not investing today, it's just wrong. And the way we prove it, Larry Kudlow always says, profits are the mother's milk of prosperity. And I'm always yelling at Larry. I'm like, yeah, but Larry, who's the mother? All right. And what I mean by that is, where does those profits come from? They come from productivity, efficiency, technology, investment. And we have record corporate profits this year, especially if we take out energy. Everybody knows we've lost a ton in energy. But if you take that away, we have, this morning, J.P. Morgan announced 10% increase in its earnings. We're going to have 8 to 10% increase in earnings this year outside of energy. And so, yeah, the market's down in the last few days. People are really freaked out, partly because they believe the big lie. They think the free market failed us, all right? And I want to close up with this, and that is, when Republicans, George Bush and Hank Paulson, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan voted for TARP. George Bush said, Hank Paulson, you got free rein. You do what you think is necessary. But he was appointed by a Republican. When they passed TARP, what they did, yell at me if you think I'm wrong. I always thought Republicans believed in free markets and capitalism. Isn't that true? That was their whole point to exist. They shouldn't even be on earth if that's not what they did. All right, Democrats believe in government. Bernie Sanders is perfect, all right, because he really believes in government, all right? And so I always thought Republicans were put on earth to defend the free market. That's what I thought. Well, in this case, they didn't. They bought into the big lie. They said, if we don't pass TARP, the whole world's going to fall apart. So in other words, if you're a Republican, or if you are a conservative, or if you lean that way, you're scratching your head. Because now you're going, has my philosophy in my whole entire life been wrong? Does the private sector really screw it up so bad that the only one that can save it is government? I mean, George Bush came out and said I had to violate free market principles to save the free market. And I think I've said this to you before, but that's like saying I had to kill that guy to protect the 10 Commandments. I mean, it's crazy, right? It goes against the entire philosophy of what you stand for. And so as a result, as a thinking American, or a non-thinking one too, I mean, they're just somebody that observes out of the corner of their eye, there's no difference between the parties in Washington. There's just a difference of what makes them move. And so Republicans undermine their whole entire philosophy, and nobody knows what they stand for. And then we try to figure out how Donald Trump could be leading. That's why. Because we blew up the philosophy. And I'm telling you, I think this is one of the most serious problems we have today as a nation, is that there is no difference in Washington. Washington is about Washington. Now, it's always been, but it's worse today than it's ever been. And by the way, if you want to believe that Donald Trump can't win, I would when you're out of here, or even right now while I'm talking, Google NHL All-Star Game team captains. All right, maybe you don't know. NHL stands for National Hockey League, by the way. All right, and in professional hockey, the fans of hockey voted for the captains. There's 4 regions and divisions, and they're going to, actually, it's going to be awesome this year because they're going to play 3-on-3 hockey. Wait, you watch this. This is way, way better than one of those where there's no defense and the score is 18-12. This is awesome how fast it is and open. But anyway, they elected 4 team captains. Patrick Kane from the Chicago Blackhawks, or excuse me, Jonathan Toews from the Chicago Blackhawks. That was the right choice. Ovechkin from the Caps, and Jaromir Jagr from the Hurricanes. These are all-stars. I don't know what their average salary is, but I'm going to call it $10 million, which is a lot in a game where the hard salary cap is $70 million. These are the tippy top of their field. They are awesome. It's Peyton Manning 3 times over, all right, or however, whatever you want to think. And then the 4th one, John Scott. John Scott's played in 185 games in the National Hockey League, and he scored 5 goals. Now, by the way, that's not a lot. He's a 6'8" goon. Seriously, goon. They put him in to fight. And fighting's over in national hockey. His career is basically done. But the fans got some kind of hair up there or whatever, and voted for him. You think Donald Trump can't be president? Go look at the team captains for NHL. John Scott. By the way, he makes the minimum salary, and he just got sent back to the minors. Unreal. But that's what happens. That's our public. So I don't know what's going to happen in the election this year. If you ask me who's going to win, I think it's going to be Marco Rubio. But I really do. I'm not saying that because I'm in Florida. I love that. He brought tears to my eyes in one of the debates the other day. The last presidential candidate that ever did that was Ronald Reagan. He loves America from a really deep place in his heart, and he gets entrepreneurship. And I don't know. I really like him. I mean, I like them all. But the bottom line is that if I had to guess who it's going to be, it'll be him. I think Hillary is extremely beatable, especially if she's in jail. And yes. That was a red meat. And so I do believe there will be a Republican in the White House, and I think the Republicans will control the House and the Senate. And by the way, that does not mean we have perfect policies, but it does mean that we have a chance to cut the size of government before it eats us alive, and the racehorse can't drag the plow horse anymore, and we got to take it all to the glue factory. Thank you very much.
Brian, thanks. You have a way of bringing the sensational down to rational, and we appreciate that. We have time for just a couple of minutes because we need to get Brian out of here to Tampa. So as we maybe turn up the house lights and turn off the spots, I know that there's an issue that's on many people's minds, so I'm going to go ahead and start it off, and that is China. And the fact that, again, that is one of the sensational news stories that's been out there. And neither one of you really said a whole lot about that, so I'm gonna kick it off with that.
You want to go first? Or want me to go first? I'll go first real quick. So people always go, "What about China? It's slowing down." My line, I just say, it's a communist country. Are you really going to bet on a communist country to bail us out of anything? Like, seriously. Like, we've lost our minds. And the other thing is that China is the #2 economy in the world. So was Japan back in 1989. Japan collapsed. We did great. We sell about $100 billion worth of stuff to China every year. That's it. If they shut down tomorrow, we'd lose 0.5% of our GDP. 0.5%. And by the way, that can only happen once. You can only turn off once. Can't turn off twice. So that's it. We would have grown last year about 1.5 instead of 2, but we would have grown. So yeah, it's big, but and one of the things people let China rent space in their brains. Not sure why, but they do. And part of the reason is that it's grown 10% a year for 25 years. And they think they figured out some magic elixir or secret sauce, you know. And here's the question to you: how do you grow 10% a year for 25 years? How do you do that? You know how you do it? First, do nothing for 1,000 years.
I agree with Brian in the long term. Obviously, China is a communist country. It is changing. And what I'm concerned about from a cyclical point of view, short-term point of view, is the fact that China is a huge market for commodities, and that's impacting the exports of emerging markets when China slows down because of its sheer size. So, yeah, long-term, I agree. I think, you know, these countries come and go, and the U.S. remains because we have innovation, we have entrepreneurship. And Brian is right, and I agree. I think most economists would agree. We got some serious challenges in Washington that we need to take care of. If we kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, which is entrepreneurship and innovation, we're in real trouble in the USA. So I don't believe China is this huge, big thing that it's going to overtake the USA or anything else like that. Quite the contrary, but it has ripple effects throughout the economy, and you see that in South America, some of our major trade partners, at least in the short term.
Okay. All right, great. Questions? Gosh, you all did a great job. Answered all their questions. That's for sure.
I do disagree with Brian on the forecast who's going to be the Republican nominee, but I'm a Jeb Bush guy, so anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
Okay.
hard.
Do we have anything out there? Any questions?
I will add that, just real quick, that China, I do agree, they're an important engine. Caterpillar, John Deere, they're both Illinois companies. I don't know why they're still there, but they get hurt. You know, mining slows down. However, the world does need heavy metals. It does need I mean, there's other places to mine, and so what happens is there's a transition period that you go through where there's pain, but the growth tends to be picked up somewhere else. So Japan used to be that, right? 1989, they were the second largest economy in the world. People would always say, "What if Japan collapses?" And they did, and yet we kept growing. And by the way, they were the same. They built consumer goods and exported them to the West. And that's exactly what China does. They build consumer goods and they export them to the West. And so if they don't do it, Singapore, Thailand, Africa, South America, somebody will do it. Mexico will pick it up. But there's a transition period in the middle, but it's not a long-term problem. And I think that's both our points. Or, I wasn't clarifying you, but.
Again, these are very complex issues, and again, we appreciate both of you bringing it down to some of the basics and there's, I've been in this business over 33 years, and there's always something, and there will be something next time you return, and it'll be a different swan.
Yeah, and
So-
the question, one of the questions that I don't think, and I know you have some thoughts on this, but about how many times the Fed might raise rates this year. If you look at, kind of their statements, they would say 4 times, which, by the way, leaves rates at 1.25. Anybody in here? Is that the end for you? Like, it's still a very, very low rate. I kind of doubt they're going to go all that way, 2 or 3 times, especially, with the market starting off like this. They're nervous. But this is not all, I think it's more of a coincidence than a cause. Going from 1/8% to 3/8% in interest rates is not, Apple's still going to bring out the iPhone 7, all right? And so this idea that somehow it's going to change the course of all construction and all manufacturing and all IT and all inventions, I just don't buy it. And so I would argue probably 2 or 3 rate hikes, 1% interest rates by the end of the year, roughly. But they're going to go really, really slow, and it won't throw the economy.
And this is why I continue to be very strong and bullish on the Florida economy, because not only our business climate, but also we're interest sensitive, and the kind of rate increases that we're likely to see, if any, will certainly not deter at all the growth rate of our state, given our positive business climate, and also the low energy prices that we see that translates into lower aviation fuel and all the other things. Florida is an energy importing state. So we got everything here. I mean, we got relatively low interest rates, the economy growing at a moderate pace in the U.S., and the downdrafts is from the global economy, but again, not enough to really make a major dent on the growth rate of Florida this year. But we have the interest rates at relatively low levels and low energy prices, people coming in, about almost 1,000 people a day, to over 20 million people in our great state, generating a lot of spending and investment, highly innovation, highly entrepreneurial economy. We're good for 2016.
We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I know that we need to get Brian to his flight. Gentlemen, thank you. Brian, Dr. Tony, thank you so much for being with us. We'd like to thank the Lakeland Chamber of Commerce. Again, we want to congratulate Corey Skates on his successful first year. We'd also like to congratulate our very own Kurt Elmhurst. Again, he's outgoing chair this year, and also welcome Mike McGee. He's going to, again, great job, everyone. I want to thank the Lakeland Center and our team there at Allen & Company. And again, most of all, we really appreciate your attendance, and have a very healthy, happy, and successful 2016. Thank you.